Look, I love Dan Preston. I've been following his journey since the beginning, and I genuinely admire what he's doing. But there's one decision he made early on that I think was a massive mistake, and I'm pretty sure he knows it too, even if he'll never admit it publicly. This video might be controversial, but someone needs to say it. And before you come for me in the comments, stick around because I'm going to explain exactly why this matters for anyone dreaming of buying their own chateau. So for those who don't know, Dan Preston bought Chateau de Chaumont for €60,000 back in 2022. Sounds like an amazing deal, right? Historic chateau, incredible story, dirt cheap price. What could go wrong? Now, I want to be clear. I'm not criticizing Dan as a person. The guy's got incredible determination, and what he's achieved so far is genuinely impressive. He truly is a hero in the Chateauverse. But when I look at this purchase from a practical standpoint, there's one glaring issue that I think he underestimated massively. And that issue is location, location, location. Let me show you something that Dan glossed over in his early videos. Chateau de Chaumont is in Mainsat, in the Creuse department. Now, if you're not familiar with this area, Creuse is literally the least populated department in all of France. We're talking about a region that's been hemorrhaging people for decades. The nearest proper town is, well, there isn't one. The nearest city with actual amenities is over an hour away. Now, Dan has touched on this isolation in his videos, but I think he's massively underplayed how this affects everything: resale value, renovation costs, even basic living expenses. Think about it. Every single tradesperson has to travel over an hour to reach his property. That's automatically adding travel costs to every single job. Getting materials delivered? Extra charges. Emergency repairs? Good luck finding someone quickly. But here's the thing that really bothers me, and I think Dan knows this but won't say it publicly. This location choice severely limits his future options. Let's be honest about resale value. Even if Dan completely renovates this chateau to perfection, who's going to buy it? The pool of potential buyers for a remote chateau in the least populated area of France is tiny. And I mean tiny. Compare this to other chateau YouTubers who bought in areas with better transport links, closer to airports, nearer to amenities. They've got options Dan simply doesn't have. And you can see it in his recent videos, right? The frustration with getting contractors, the challenges with basic services, the isolation during winter months. These aren't just temporary renovation problems, they're permanent location problems. Now let me break down the actual financial impact of this location choice, because the numbers are shocking. I've done some research on contractor costs in different regions of France, and here's what I found. In Creuse, Dan is probably paying 25 to 40% more for skilled trades than he would in more populated areas. Why? Because every contractor has to factor in travel time and costs. Think about it. If you need a plumber in Loire Valley, they might charge €50 an hour and be there in 30 minutes. In Creuse, that same plumber charges €50 an hour plus travel time. Plus they have to justify making the journey for anything less than a full day's work. So a 2-hour job suddenly becomes a 6-hour minimum charge. And don't get me started on materials. Specialized restoration supplies, period-appropriate fixtures, even basic building materials. Everything has to be specially delivered to the middle of nowhere. Those delivery charges add up fast. But here's the real kicker, and this is something I think Dan maybe didn't fully consider. The extra money he's spending on location-related costs could have bought him a property in a better area. We're talking potentially tens of thousands of euros in additional costs over the full renovation. There's another angle to this that I think is crucial: tourism potential. And this is where the chateau's location choice really shows its limitations. Most successful chateau renovations eventually rely on some form of tourism revenue, whether that's B&B guests, event hosting, tours, or even just Airbnb. But Creuse gets virtually no tourism compared to other regions. Loire Valley gets millions of tourists annually. Normandy has massive tourist infrastructure. Dordogne is packed with expats and tourists year-round. Creuse? It's beautiful, but it's not on anyone's bucket list. This means if Dan ever wants to monetize his chateau beyond YouTube, and let's be honest, that's probably necessary for long-term sustainability. He's fighting against geography. No foot traffic, no tourism infrastructure, no established market for chateau experiences. And here's the catch. 22. Without tourism potential, the chateau remains purely a cost center. But without multiple revenue streams, maintaining a property of that size becomes financially unsustainable. It's a problem that location choice created, and location choice makes almost impossible to solve. Problems. Now, here's what I think Dan should have done, and what I'd advise anyone else in his position. For the same 60,000 euros, or maybe 80 to 100,000 euros, he could have found properties in areas like Normandy, Loire Valley, or even parts of Brittany, regions with tourism, better infrastructure, and actual resale potential. Yes, he might have gotten a smaller property or one needing more work, but the long-term prospects would be so much better. Better contractors available, better resale value, better quality of life. Now, I can hear some of you saying, but the historical significance. And yes, the history is incredibly important. But there were other historically significant properties available that didn't come with such severe location disadvantages. So, where does this leave Dan now? Well, he's basically committed to this path whether he likes it or not. I think his YouTube channel success is actually masking the underlying problem. The channel gives him income that makes the location viable, but what happens if the channel struggles? What happens if chateau content goes out of fashion? And I think you can see signs that he's starting to realize this. Look at his recent content. He's branching out more, trying different formats, building the brand beyond just the chateau. That's smart, but it also suggests he knows he needs multiple income streams to make this location work. So, what can we learn from this? If you're thinking about buying a chateau, or any property abroad really, here are my takeaways. First, location matters more than price. A 100,000 euros chateau in a decent area beats a 60,000 euros chateau in the middle of nowhere every single time. Second, think about your exit strategy. Even if you're planning to stay forever, you need to consider what happens if circumstances change. Third, factor in all the costs. That cheap purchase price means nothing if you're paying premium rates for everything else because of location. Fourth, be realistic about isolation. It sounds romantic until you need an emergency plumber at 2 a.m. on a Sunday. Look, I genuinely hope Dan proves me wrong. I hope his chateau becomes worth 10 times what he paid for it. I hope the area experiences some kind of renaissance, and I hope his gamble pays off spectacularly. But if I'm being honest, I think he'd be the first to admit, privately, that if he had his time again, he might have chosen a different location. The romantic dream of owning a chateau sometimes clouds the practical realities of property investment. What do you think? Am I being too harsh, or do you agree that location was a mistake? And if you're chateau hunting yourself, what factors are you prioritizing? Let me know in the comments. If you want more realistic takes on chateau life and property hunting in France, make sure you're subscribed. I'll be covering more chateau channels and giving you the honest analysis you won't get anywhere else. You can also become a member of my channel and support my work. If you become a member, you even have the opportunity to receive a shout out. You also have access to specific emojis and members-only shorts. Becoming a member helps supports the creation of high-quality videos on some of your favorite chateau YouTubers, and it helps create this place of discussion and sharing information on some of these beloved properties.